Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, another failed vote means the government shutdown continues, plus a rocky Tuesday amid peace proceedings in the Middle East, and the Medal of Freedom is awarded to Charlie Kirk. The federal government's partial shutdown has reached a 15th day. The Senate yesterday rejected a potential funding deal for the 8th time. Meanwhile, the White House Office of Management and Budget is vowing to batten down the hatches and ride out the shutdown while continuing layoffs. More than 750,000 federal workers have been furloughed and ordered not to report to work. Employees deemed essential to public safety, including military personnel, law enforcement officers, and air traffic controllers, among others, must work without pay until a budget deal is reached. For members of the military, today is payday, and President Donald Trump has insisted that active duty troops should be paid regardless of the shutdown. He said on Truth Social that he's using his authority to direct Pete Hegseth to use all available funds to pay the troops today. He did not identify funding sources. As for getting the government to reopen, Democrats are pushing to ensure tax breaks for 24 million Americans who buy insurance through the Affordable Care Act. The Senate Dems want to make the tax breaks permanent, which would otherwise expire at the end of the year. Republicans and the president say they're open to considering a fix for the expiring ACA tax breaks, but want the issue addressed separately from the ongoing budget impasse. You can stay with all the latest on usatoday.com. A day after his trip to the Middle East to celebrate a ceasefire agreement, President Donald Trump told reporters at the White House yesterday that Hamas would disarm in a reasonable period of time, or the U.S. will disarm them, perhaps violently.
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
Hamas handed over the bodies of more deceased hostages yesterday after Israel said it would restrict aid and delay plans to open the border crossing with Egypt because they said Hamas had violated ceasefire conditions by failing to turn over the bodies of hostages. Hamas has accused Israel of violating the ceasefire. Israel, using aerial drones, killed 5 Palestinians as they went to check on houses in a suburb east of Gaza City, and an Israeli strike killed 1 person and injured another near Khan Yunis, according to Gaza health authorities. Meanwhile, Palestinian security officials said dozens of people had been killed in clashes between Hamas fighters and rivals in recent days. In a video circulating this week, Hamas fighters dragged 7 men with their hands tied behind their backs into a Gaza City square, forced them to their knees, and shot them from behind. President Trump yesterday presented the Medal of Freedom to the late Charlie Kirk, delivering the medal to his widow, Erica.
Now I can say with confidence, Mr. President, that you have given him the best birthday gift he could ever have.
I caught up with USA Today White House correspondent Bart Jansen for more from the ceremony. Thanks for hopping on, Bart.
Thanks for having me.
So, President Trump awarded Charlie Kirk the Medal of Freedom here. Just what is this medal, Bart, for folks who aren't as familiar?
It's the highest civilian honor that can be granted in the United States. President Kennedy, about 60 years ago, created the medal to honor extraordinary performance in a variety of subjects, but it's basically up to the discretion of the president to award, but they are not given out lightly, and so this is a very high honor.
Well, Bart, who attended this ceremony, and what were some of the things we heard from the president and others?
Well, the crowd was large enough that Trump moved it outdoors. They wound up getting a break in the weather. He said God must have been watching and decided, no, I can't rain on this ceremony, and so he organized it out in the Rose Garden, just outside the offices at the White House. The crowd, probably a couple of hundred people, including his son, Donald Trump Jr., Vice President Vance, several cabinet members, congressional leadership, and of course, Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, accepted the award on his behalf, and her family also attended.
Just in terms of the tone of the ceremony, what else did we hear?
Well, Trump said that he was a person who the president would never forget. He said Kirk had supported his candidacy when he ran for president the first time in 2015. He faced 17 Republican rivals for the nomination, but Kirk stuck with him. He said, no, so you're going to win. And so he considered Kirk a close political ally and said that sadly his death made him a martyr for truth and freedom. Trump said he was honoring a fearless warrior for liberty a beloved leader who galvanized the next generation like nobody I've ever seen before, and an American patriot of the deepest conviction. Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, who has become the CEO of Turning Point USA in his absence, accepted the award at the White House. She was wiping away tears as the citation was read by a member of the military. And then she gave some emotional comments, again, through tears that she wiped away frequently, saying that he always said the next generation will be the generation that decides whether freedom endures. She said the event was held on what would have been his 32nd birthday, but she said he typically celebrated birthdays very quietly. He would only have mint chocolate chip ice cream 2 days a year, on the 4th of July and on his birthday, but that she thinks that President Trump has come up with perhaps the best gift ever in awarding him this Presidential Medal of Freedom. She said there was no limit to what he would have sacrificed for freedom.
All right. Bart Jansen covers the White House for USA Today, joining me from Washington. Thank you, Bart.
Thanks for having me.
The Supreme Court won't review the $1.4 billion judgment against Alex Jones, the conservative media personality and conspiracy theorist who said the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a hoax staged by crisis actors. The court yesterday rejected an appeal from Jones, who had separately asked the justices to protect his assets, including his InfoWars website, while he sought their intervention. A jury in 2022 ordered Jones to pay the massive judgment to family members of several of the Sandy Hook victims and an FBI agent after a judge found Jones defamed them by claiming for years that the killings were staged in a government plot to seize Americans' guns. 26 people, including 20 children, were killed in the massacre. More No Kings protests are set for this weekend around the country. I spoke with USA Today senior national political correspondent Sarah D. Wire for more. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on as always. So what do we know about these latest planned protests?
So, altogether, there are about 2,500 events scheduled in big cities, suburbs, and tiny towns across the nation. We're going to see big protests outside the Capitol in Washington, D.C., in Boston, New York, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco, a few other places. Every state has at least a few protests, and some states like California have hundreds planned.
How will these, Sarah, compare with the No Kings Day protests we saw earlier this year over the summer?
This summer, there were about 1,800 locations for the June 14th protest, and at least hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, came out. Organizers are expecting a big surge because of immigration enforcement, the government shutdown, and now National Guard troops being sent to major Democratic cities.
You know, these come amid an ongoing, now weeks-long government shutdown, Sarah. How is that hanging over these gatherings?
Republicans are saying that Democrats have prolonged the shutdown to put on a show for their base ahead of these protests. The Democratic base was really frustrated when Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer joined Republicans in March to avoid a shutdown. And these protests were planned long before the shutdown, and activists acknowledge they are pushing Democrats not to cave on their demands, but not because of these protests.
Are there any safety concerns ahead of Saturday, Sarah? I know some have flagged that.
There were a few incidents at the June 14th rallies, but it was so minor compared to the sheer breadth of people who came out. This time, organizers have required local activists to undergo crowd safety and de-escalation training. They've really stressed that this is a celebration of the right to protest, not an opportunity to fight with police or counter-protesters.
You know, I'm curious, Sarah, if this year's protests have been having the impact that Democrats really want. What impact are we seeing?
Organizers seem to be split on this. They say they're pushing elected Democrats towards being the opposition to Trump that activists want them to be, but others are saying that it's only a few members of the Democratic Party and not those in leadership. What I'm hearing from both sides is that primary day is around the corner. It's only a year or so away, and if they don't want to be primaried, they should back the opposition more than they have been.
Well, then how have these protests landed around the White House and this administration? How do they frame them?
Who cares is what the White House press office said to me when I asked. Normally, I get some kind of response to these previous protests, something like President Trump is doing what voters elected him to do, and he stands by his actions, or something like that. This was a pretty brief answer.
All right. Sarah D. Wire covers national politics for USA Today. Thanks for the breakdown, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
And later today, as the craze for Ozempic and Wegovy grows, a black market of homemade gray GLP-1s is taking off online. But as USA Today's wellness reporter Nicole Fallert reports, the demand and supply issues start with the legal drugs themselves.
There are FDA-approved GLP-1 drugs, and those are available to people, and it's really important to emphasize that. The problem is that because of demand and supply, we haven't been able to see this industry normalize and create a more accessible price point.
She explains why these shortages are fueling risky DIY injections and what it'll take to fix access. You can find that episode today after 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on this feed. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can find the podcast wherever you get your audio. And as always, you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.